Welcome to How to Share, a podcast that delves into sharing, one of the fundamental facets of being human. I'm Wynne Leon. In the 25 years I've spent as a technology consultant, specializing in collaborative software, I've witnessed the organizational efficiency and innovative possibilities when teams share well. But more often, I've seen in individuals and groups struggling with the basics of sharing, being vulnerable, knowing how to listen, and understanding that it's in their best interest to share everything from tools, space, experiences, wisdom, and more. It struck me that none of those basics were specific either to software or to professional environments. We're told to share from an early age, but never really taught how to. So I started digging into the why of sharing and how to do it better. I know one of the first questions that comes to mind is, what kind of sharing are we talking about? Toys, tools, files, space, calendars, meals, the planet? All of it. We do it professionally and personally. In boardrooms and in bedrooms, we tease out our willingness and ability to share. We tell our kids to share with their siblings, their friends, and strangers. All the while, we are working out how to do it best ourselves. We do it differently with colleagues, friends, lovers, siblings, parents, and children. We share opinions, stories, tools, the credit, and the blame. So what does research and wisdom teach us about sharing? In his TED Talk, What Explains the Rise of Humans?, historian Yuval Noah Harari talks about our ability to survive when stranded alone on an island. Would you bet on a human or a chimpanzee being able to survive in those conditions? Probably the chimpanzee. So he goes on to ask why humans run the planet. Because of our ability to believe stories and act because of them. His conclusion is that we control the planet because we can cooperate both flexibly and in very large numbers. Bees, for instance, can cooperate in large numbers, but not flexibly. Chimpanzees and dolphins can cooperate flexibly, but not in large numbers. We can participate in a global exchange of ideas, and that's what makes us unique. It sounds so easy when put that way. Yet I know from my years of experience helping people collaborate, there's a lot that goes into sharing anything. For example, anytime a new file location goes live, we create a matrix of audiences and permissions. What goes where and who can read, write, and control it. Of course, this is a piece of cake compared to examples from ancient times. Christy Macrakis was a professor of history at Georgia Tech. In her book, Espionage, A Concise History, she provides one of my favorite examples from ancient Greece. Histius, the ruler of Miletus, an ancient city in what's now Turkey, shaved the head of a slave, tattooed it with a message, and waited for the hair to grow back. Then he sent the messenger on a long journey from Persia to Greece to urge revolt. Upon arrival, the messenger's head was shaved again to read the text. I'm never going to complain about setting permissions in SharePoint again. But I want to talk about why sharing is hard. So here's a concrete example. It's kind of a basic one. Last summer my kids and I were heading to a local wading pool on a hot day in Seattle. And anticipating the fun of floating around in knee-deep water with 100 other kids, my 4-year-old son grabbed his favorite toy boat. But I anticipated the chaos of 101 kids, with about 50 parents sprinkled in various states of tuned-inness. So I instantly felt the stress of having to keep track of one toy boat. I believe in the goodness of people, so it wasn't that I didn't want him to share, or that I thought someone was going to, intentionally take our boat. But the responsibility of keeping track of everything that we bring weighs on me. All of a sudden, telling my kids to share looked a lot more complicated. Couldn't we bring our least favorite boat? And that example encapsulates some of the difficulties that come with sharing. It's vulnerable. I think I know how it's going to turn out. And I don't have the time or patience for it. So let's talk about vulnerability. Researcher, professor, and author Brené Brown has written extensively about vulnerability. In her book, Atlas of the Heart, she publishes the results of when she asked tens of thousands of people to provide examples of vulnerability. She created a list, and out of that list, I've picked 5 of the 12 examples she provided related to sharing. Number 1, talking about race with my team, or talking about my feelings. Remembering that leaders don't have all the answers, but ask important questions. The 4th one, apologizing to a colleague about how I spoke to him in a meeting. And the ubiquitous 5th one, giving and getting feedback. But Brené goes on to explain that vulnerability is a key part of courage and leadership. In her words, in my most recent research on courage and leadership, the ability to embrace vulnerability emerged as the prerequisite for all the daring leadership behaviors. If we can't handle uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure in a way that aligns with our values and further our organizational goals, we can't lead. One of the other things that gets in the way of sharing with others is when we think we know. Whether it be what someone else wants, or how they'll react, or what's going to happen when we do a group project, we think we know how it'll turn out. Yeah, I have to admit that even sometimes I think I'm experienced enough to know what'll happen when my kids try to work with their peers. And I don't even know their peers. In his book, Mind-Wise, Why We Misunderstand What Others Think, Believe, Feel, and Want, University of Chicago professor Nicholas Epley describes an experiment from the 1950s. 4,000 workers and supervisors at a large manufacturing plant were asked to rank how much they cared about different sources of motivation in their jobs. When workers and supervisors ranked their own motivations, the results were very similar. Both groups valued the same thing. But when supervisors were asked to predict the workers' motivations, Nicholas Epley writes, there was almost no correlation between what they personally valued and what they believed their workers valued. Professor Epley explains many reasons why we get it wrong. Egocentrism, the lens we look through, projection, and more. What I walked away with after reading this book was similar to what I've seen time and again as people collaborate. We have to repeatedly communicate with each other to effectively share, because overall, we are terrible mind readers and terrible futurists. I'll say that for myself. But if I'm hurrying to get a deliverable out to a client, I turn off all my communication avenues and try to focus on what needs to be done. I'll resist the urge to check the news or search for whale encounter videos. It just makes sense that I don't have time to chit-chat. But I've seen that when that becomes the chronic situation for people and teams, with everyone closed off so that they can get stuff done, it becomes a bigger problem over time. We cancel team meetings, forget to share revised priorities, we can't ask a question about the meeting we had last week, and we stop the flow of information. I have a classic example from a team I work with to help them improve efficiency and profitability. You know, in the layout in the office, they were in an office that had a central area that had cubicles. And around that area were about 6 offices that had doors. And the office admin sat in the middle of the central area. One day, she announced that the unit's printer was offline. She'd called in the repairman, and she put in a call to the repairman, but for the time being, it was down. But one of the project managers was in an office with the door closed. When that project manager came out for a quick coffee refill, the admin said, but the project manager cut her off, saying she was on a deadline. When that project manager went to print her deliverable to rush to a client meeting, she completely lost it. She came screaming out of her closed office, yelling, "I can't print. Nobody told me. I'm going to be late." It would have been laughable, except for it was chronic. Some openness for sharing information can save a lot of time and stress. I see this with my young kids as well. If I'm focused on a paper or a project or a post, I'll tune out their small bids for attention. This often leads to the next item being a bigger demand or meltdown. Certainly there are times and situations when we have to shut our doors. But an overall belief that sharing takes too much time usually proves to be crippling. I want to talk about a final hurdle that we face when we share. When we share, we risk that people will take our stuff, whether it's a toy boat, our favorite lawn tools, or our ideas. Putting them out there means that they might not be returned or treated respectfully. More irritating, I'll speak for myself personally, is when somebody takes advantage of my openness. I have a story to tell, and it's on myself. When I was in third or fourth grade, my friend Katie invited me over to her house to play. She showed me the amazing fort she had in a closet under her stairs. It had a door, had a light on a string, and in my memory, it was laid out perfectly. It was stocked with all the most amazing dolls and toys. It was so cool. So, I went home to find where I could build my own fort. I borrowed a small storage room where the sewer pipe ran through, and we stored our luggage. And I loved that fort so much that I think I spent most of 5th grade sleeping there instead of my own bedroom. Now, fortunately, Katie and I are still friends almost 50 years later. And she sometimes teases me about taking her idea and running with it. You know, I'm guilty as charged. And I'm guessing that every one of you has an example when you shared an idea or a prototype and someone else claimed it as their own. When we share, we risk losing control. But the flip side is that when we don't share, too often ideas never make it out of our heads. So like the examples of setting permissions on a file or tattooing a message on our scalp, we need to know how to share in the right way to the appropriate audience at hopefully the best time. We also need to understand how to receive when others share. That's what we'll be talking about on this podcast. The wisdom, the research, usually with guests who bring that wisdom and research, but sometimes just with my own examples from a long career helping people to collaborate. So I want to return and answer once again, why do we share? I once went on a group climb of the Mexican volcanoes. There was Mount Ixtaccíhuatl, which was about 17,200 feet, and we were attempting the 18,500-foot Pico de Orizaba. And at the beginning of the climb, when we went around the circle to introduce ourselves, one of the guys on the climb said he really didn't like people. And as we traveled and climbed for the next 10 days, he kept to himself so much that it became crystal clear that he wasn't joking and preferred to be left alone. But the benefits of a team effort to summit a mountain outweighed the discomfort of sharing the experience. And so whether we are sharing information, tools, or experiences, we can do more together. As Harari says, humans have the great advantage of being able to cooperate flexibly and in large numbers. On this podcast, we'll talk about how. Thank you. Thank you for listening. Our music is composed by the incredibly talented duo of Jack Canfora and Rob Koenig. For more great how to share inspiration, please visit our site at avativa.com, AVITIVA.com.